The South China Sea has for millennia been a vital living space for the Vietnamese people and neighboring countries in the region. It is also one of the world's most important international maritime routes. From the perspective of history, practical exploitation and management, as well as based on the provisions of international law. The Paracel Islands and the Spratly Islands along with their surrounding waters are an integral part of Vietnam's sacred territory, Vietnam's exclusive economic zone and continental shelf. However, due to their strategic importance, these two archipelagos and the vast South China Sea have long been targets of China's ambitions to create a solid springboard for advancing into the Pacific Ocean and further into the Indian Ocean. Additionally, full control of this sea would also help the mainland resolve the Taiwan issue. For these interests, over many years, China has not hesitated to enact a series of new policies with a more aggressive approach to realize the ambition of monopolizing the entire South China Sea. The Great Wall of Sand, China's illusion of monopolizing the South China Sea. Since July 2012, besides brazenly making a series of declarations and irrational arguments, they have also Sancha City to seize islands in the South China Sea, including the Paracel and Spratly Islands, which are under Vietnam's sovereignty. Specifically, the Paracel Islands were forcibly occupied by China after a naval battle with the Republic of Vietnam Navy. Currently, Phu Lam is known as the largest island in the Paracel Islands. With a total area after multiple reclamations, it has reached 2.6 square kilometers. Not only that, the island now impresses with a runway up to 2,700 meters long, capable of accommodating the takeoff and landing of fourth-generation fighter jets. And this project is seen as evidence of Beijing's ambition to enhance control over the South China Sea through military strength. Since December 22, 2016, China has also brazenly operated illegal civilian flights to the airport on Phu Lam Island, which is an inseparable part of Vietnam's sovereignty. In the Spratly Islands, which are under Vietnam's sovereignty, although controlling only 7 features, it is no different from a massive construction site in the open sea. Because Beijing has invested much effort and money to build structures on large-scale artificial islands, thereby establishing 3 outposts: Mischief Reef, Subi Reef, and Fiery Cross Reef. From a small island, it has developed into one of the 3 largest islands in the Spratly Islands. On these artificial lands, China has built long runways, deep water ports, large missile storage facilities, and extensive radar systems. Along with many other civilian and military facilities, it can accommodate and treat thousands of people, hundreds of ships and dozens of military aircraft. The most typical example is Mischief Reef. From an initial coral reef, through natural accretion, the area of the island has expanded to 5.52 square kilometers, becoming the largest feature illegally occupied by China in the Spratly Islands under Vietnam's sovereignty. Currently, it also boasts a 2,700-meter runway capable of accommodating large transport aircraft. After conducting large-scale land reclamation and artificial island construction, Beijing has continuously expanded aggressive actions into the southern South China Sea. In the exclusive economic zones south of Vietnam, east of Malaysia, north of Indonesia, and west of the Philippines. It can be affirmed that building artificial islands is an effective tool for the mainland to conduct illegal intrusions into the waters, airspace, and seabed within the exclusive economic zones of neighboring countries. The Great Wall was completed in the 16th century during the Ming Dynasty. Its purpose was not only to block powerful nomadic tribes from northern China, not only to protect Han communities that had migrated to the grasslands. Today, China's massive reclamation of numerous reefs has also prompted Admiral Harry Harris Jr. to speak out. Since the U.S. Pacific Fleet commander compared this to building a Great Wall of Sand in the South China Sea 9-line, it can be seen that, driven by the ambition to monopolize the South China Sea, China has produced a series of strategies and tactics. But things do not stop at legitimizing their arbitrary actions. The pursuit of maritime interests and resources seems to have made the mainland much more determined and aggressive. They promote activities on the blurred line between war and peace. Increasingly blatant and arbitrary actions lead many to suspect that Beijing is implementing a gunboat diplomacy policy to exert multilateral pressure on countries in the region, aiming to achieve the set strategic objectives. Since the Philippines filed a lawsuit against China at the Permanent Court of Arbitration under the United Nations in The Hague, Netherlands. Regarding control over Scarborough Shoal, Beijing currently holds de facto control. Relations between the two countries have experienced many ups and downs, especially since Philippine President Marcos came to power. He denied that the country had any private agreements with the mainland and announced withdrawal from cooperation programs under the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. At the same time, promoting and strengthening security and technology cooperation with the United States and Japan. Among these, tensions between the two countries at Second Thomas Shoal have emerged as a focal point of conflict in the South China Sea. This is originally a submerged reef within the Spratly Islands, under the sovereignty of Vietnam. However, the Philippine military still uses the old warship BRP Sierra Madre, which was intentionally grounded here, as an outpost to maintain an illegal presence in this area since 1999. There is a marine unit stationed on the ship, and they are entirely dependent on supplies from the mainland. China has also unilaterally declared sovereignty over this geographical feature. Since 2021, tensions between Beijing and Manila at Second Thomas Shoal have seen increasing developments. However, the change in tactics by the Chinese Coast Guard and Maritime militia in 4 has caused Philippine ships to suffer heavier damage, while the country's forces also suffered more casualties. And the risk of escalation is higher than ever. It can be affirmed that no year has witnessed as many maritime clashes between the two countries as this year. On March 5, the first notable clash of the year occurred, recorded in a panoramic television report by CNN. The CNN reporter team was the first international press group to accompany Manila's ship on a supply mission to the BRP Sierra Madre at Second Thomas Shoal. Spratly Islands, about 200 kilometers from the Philippines. Early that morning, a group of Chinese Coast Guard ships in overwhelming numbers suddenly appeared and continuously moved around the Philippine ships. Shortly after, a collision occurred between ships of both sides, and Beijing actively rammed a supply ship, shattering its windshield and windows. At the same time, the incident also injured 4 soldiers on board. As a result, only one supply ship could reach the Sierra Madre's location. Not only were there decisive actions on the ground, but the mainland also showed great determination and firmness in media activities. The Global Times reported that the country's Coast Guard had implemented control measures, including the use of water cannons, against Philippine ships that had infringed upon the waters off Second Thomas Shoal in the South China Sea. A spokesperson for the China Coast Guard stated that the Philippines had deliberately dispatched 2 patrol ships and 2 supply ships to infringe upon the waters under China's sovereignty. Second Thomas Shoal. This person also argued that Beijing was only taking necessary measures to control the situation. Not long after, on March 23, 2024, a similar incident occurred when the Chinese Coast Guard used water cannons against the Unakami 4. Previously, this ship was on its way to transport soldiers and supplies to the Sierra Madre naval ship at Second Thomas Shoal. The collision caused significant damage to the Philippine ship and injured 3 soldiers. In addition, ships from both countries frequently clash at Scarborough Shoal, where both Beijing and Manila claim sovereignty. This feature is about 230 kilometers from the Philippines' Luzon Island and about 1,000 kilometers from Hainan Island. On April 30, 2024, Manila officials confirmed that a Coast Guard ship and a supply ship of the country had been blocked by the Chinese Coast Guard. The ship was damaged due to encountering a storm while en route to Scarborough Shoal to assist Filipino fishermen. In response, the mainland stated that it had driven away the Philippine Coast Guard ship 4410 and public service ship 3004. For actions infringing upon the waters near Wangyan Island, the name Beijing uses for Scarborough Shoal. By June 17, 2024, the Philippine military once again accused the Chinese Coast Guard of intentionally ramming their ship at high speed. To clarify the supply mission for the military stationed in the Second Thomas Shoal area, several sailors were injured, including one who lost a finger and was immediately hospitalized for treatment. Conversely, Beijing refuted the above argument and claimed that Manila's ship had deliberately approached dangerously. The country's ship was forced to accept control measures, including boarding inspections and expulsion. Recognizing that the risk of escalation would lead to unpredictable consequences, China temporarily took steps to appease international public opinion. Therefore, on July 21, 2024, the Philippines and China jointly signed a temporary agreement regarding the supply for Manila's soldiers stationed on the BRP Sierra Madre. Accordingly, the two countries committed to ending confrontations in the area and agreed to maintain positive dialogue. Although only temporary, this consultation also helped to somewhat ease tensions and conflicts. Tensions between Manila and Beijing in the South China Sea have recently shown signs of cooling down. Specifically, on July 27, this Southeast Asian island nation successfully supplied Second Thomas Shoal without any interference from the country's law enforcement forces. However, this period of détente did not last long. In the middle of the night on August 19, 2024, Chinese Coast Guard ships rammed Philippine ships in the Second Thomas Shoal area. The incident caused one ship to have a hole approximately 1.1 meters wide, while the other ship had a hole about 0.9 meters wide. Coast Guard ships have intentionally ramming and using water cannons to attack ships of the country. This is originally an atoll belonging to Vietnam's Spratly Islands, located about 140 kilometers from Palawan Island, Philippines, and about 1,170 kilometers from Hainan Island, China. Another important point showing Sabina Shoal's strategic position is its distance of only about 58 kilometers west to Ko May Shoal. Therefore, in the event Manila occupies Sabina Shoal, if Philippine supply ships encounter bad weather on the way to Ko May Shoal, Sabina Shoal would serve as a temporary shelter for these forces before they continue their mission. Instead of having to struggle to return to Palawan Island, which is quite far away. Just one day after the collision, tensions escalated further when the mainland dispatched 40 ships, including 3 warships, to the area. 2 Philippine ships on a supply mission to BRP Teresa Magbanua at Sabina Shoal were surrounded. By August 31, 2024, Coast Guard ships from both countries collided again in the area. According to a statement from the Chinese Coast Guard, a Philippine ship illegally anchored at Sabina Shoal. Subsequently, the ship weighed anchor and intentionally rammed another ship of the same country. Conversely, Manila also accused a Chinese ship of intentionally ramming its vessel. Thus, in August, tensions between the Philippines and China at Ko May Shoal continued to develop complexly. But at the same time, Sabina Shoal has also emerged and become a new hotspot, and is very likely to witness more collisions in the near future. It can be seen that since the beginning of the year, all clashes have occurred between the law enforcement forces of the two countries. Both Beijing and Manila have not hesitated to respond to each other fiercely, thereby raising concerns about a dangerous escalation at sea. Among these, the risk of leading to direct conflict is very high. Parallel to confrontational activities with Philippine law enforcement forces, China has also carried out many acts infringing on the sovereignty of other countries, including Vietnam. Based on data from marine traffic in February 2024, Coast Guard Ship 5901 activated its Automatic Identification System, ICE, while operating near Tu Chin Reef in Vietnam, and was present in the area for several consecutive days, although no direct confrontations occurred. However, dispatching the Coast Guard ship to Tu Chin Reef is an act of reinforcing forces, affirming Vietnam's sovereignty, and is entirely appropriate. The 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea has violated our country's sovereignty. Additionally, the functional forces of this province have repeatedly chased away, obstructed, and plundered the property of the people, fishing equipment and marine resources of our fishermen while fishing in Vietnam's exclusive economic zone. The above incidents not only severely impact fishing activities at sea but also cause significant property damage, threatening lives and causing great panic among the people. A typical case is the incident involving fishing vessel Queener G98852, registered for purse seine fishing, owned by Mr. Nguyen Quang Du. In Duc Pha Town, Quang Ngai Province, he is the shipowner and captain along with 11 other fishermen. On August 22, while fishing at sea, The fishing vessel was about 18 to 20 kilometers southwest of Bac Long Vi Island, which is part of Vietnam's sovereignty in the Paracel Islands but is currently illegally occupied by China. Chinese vessel number 301 approached and launched 2 speedboats, coming alongside the fishing vessel. Subsequently, 17 people in uniforms boarded the fishing vessel, controlled it, and moved the 11 fishermen to the bow. They searched the fishing vessel and confiscated 3 tons of seafood including tuna and mackerel, along with 6 LED lights and a fish scoop. 120 plastic crates, 50 meters of air hose, smashed 5 1,000-watt bulbs, and cut and damaged 1 purse seine net. Total estimated damage is about 143.5 million Vietnamese dongs. However, the most notable incident is the one involving fishermen on fishing vessel Queener G 95739 of Quang Ngai Province. On September 29, Chinese law enforcement forces launched a large-scale and serious attack. Specifically, when the ship was more than 28 kilometers from Chim Yen Island in the Paracel Islands. At that time, Captain Nguyen Ton Bien spotted another ship speeding directly toward his vessel. 1 hour later, when the ship closed in and caught up, the fishermen clearly saw it was Chinese pursuit vessel number 301. When approaching the fishermen's vessel, they launched 2 speedboats to chase and capture but were unsuccessful. Therefore, another vessel numbered 101 was dispatched and launched an additional speedboat to coordinate with vessel 301. After more than an hour of pursuit, around 9 a.m., nearly 40 people on the large ship used hooks to pull the fishing vessel to control it, then hung a net to scoop the catch. Subsequently, they used iron rods to repeatedly beat our fishermen and smashed the cabin, causing Captain Bien to be injured and unconscious at the bow area. After assaulting the fishermen, the Chinese law enforcement force used a fish tarp to cover their heads to conceal all developments. Simultaneously, medical staff checked the captain's pulse, while 2 of our crew members carried the captain to the rear deck area to perform artificial respiration. In this incident, the Chinese group seized fishing gear and over 4 tons of fish from the vessel, with the total value of confiscated property amounting to more than 310 million dong. By 1 p.m., they released the fishing boat, keeping nothing except the GPS device and ordering the boat to return to shore. At this point, Captain Bien gradually regained consciousness and called to report the news to shore. When they were about 90 kilometers from shore, they were spotted, received, cared for, and had their wounds bandaged by Coast Guard ship 6001. The attack is estimated to have injured 10 of our fishermen, including 4 serious cases. Regarding the Chinese functional forces law enforcement actions, injuring and confiscating property from fishermen, Vietnamese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Pham Tu Hang emphasized on October 2 that law enforcement force are a serious violation of our country. Regarding the Paracel Islands, that action violated international law, specifically the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS, and goes against the common understanding agreed upon by senior leaders of both countries. To control and manage maritime disputes more effectively, Vietnam is extremely concerned, indignant, and firmly opposes the brutal actions of mainland China's law enforcement force. Regarding fishermen and fishing vessels operating in the Paracel Islands area under Vietnam's sovereignty, after the incident, our foreign ministry held a working session and sent a stern protest note to the Chinese embassy in Hanoi. Above actions and demand that they fully respect Vietnam. Regarding the Paracel Islands issue, an urgent investigation must be conducted and the results communicated to our side, while ensuring that similar actions do not recur. On X account on October 4, U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Mueller emphasized, "The United States expresses deep concern over reports of dangerous actions by vessels of the Chinese law enforcement force." On September 29, an incident occurred involving a Vietnamese fishing vessel in the Paracel Islands. The EU delegation in Hanoi also expressed concern over reports of this serious incident, while emphasizing the need to maintain and respect the United Nations Charter, the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and other international norms related to ensuring human safety at sea. On October 4, Philippine National Security Advisor Eduardo Año also stated that The Chinese functional forces' use of force against Vietnamese people is an act contrary to international law regulations, especially the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS 1982. On the same day, the Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs issued a clear statement affirming, Manila emphasizes the importance of resolving disputes in the South China Sea peacefully and in accordance with international law regulations, especially the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS 1982. As of the time we made this video, which is October 10th, Beijing has still not made any official statement regarding the incident of our people being brutally treated in the waters near the Paracel Islands. Aside from the response to Reuters on October 1st's announcement, Vietnamese fishing vessels were alleged to have engaged in illegal fishing activities in the Paracel Islands waters without this country, and the functional agencies promptly applied necessary measures to prevent the incident. Mainland integrity is a geopolitical concept, implying the ambition or plan to expand influence to establish control over the entire Eurasian continent. This term is often used to analyze geopolitical strategies and power balances in the region. Clearly, the Chinese coast